ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
עוזי וזמרת יה, ויהי ישועה. עוזי וזמרת יה, ויהי ישועה. עוזי וזמרת יה, ויהי ישועה. עוזי וזמרת יה,
Shabbat Shalom and a very warm welcome to all of you, whether you are one of our regulars or you're here to celebrate with Rafi and her family. Rafi becoming Bat Mitzvah this morning. Please do let us know where you're joining us from and wish Rafi Mazel Tov in the chat. You can use the chat both on Facebook and on YouTube. So do let us know, cheer Rafi on as we get to her part during the Torah service. But until then, do join in with our prayers, join in with the music, sing along with, we have Ruth and Joe here with us singing, but we do hear you sing at home, so do join in with all the singing, join in with the reading as well, as we wrap ourselves in the mantle of community on this Shabbat Shirah, this Shabbat of song, and don our talitot and say the blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehitatef b'tzitzit. If you were standing, I think you can be seated. You don't have to keep standing.
You can do whatever you want to do. I prefer to dance.
Some people
get dancing.
Get dancing, absolutely.
Yaakov, משכנותיך ישראל, מה טובו, אוהליך יעקב, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל.
Source of light, of truth, and of the impulse within us towards justice and mercy. May this hour of worship be one of vision and inspiration. Help us to find knowledge by which to live. Let the words we speak enter our hearts and influence our lives. Bless all who join us in this sanctuary, in search of you or in need of comfort and consolation. May the offering of their hearts be acceptable to you, and may the prayers we utter here bear fruit and acts of kindness, peace, and love. If you're following in Siddur Lev Chadash, we're in service number 5, and the page numbers are the page numbers at the bottom of the page.
And just before studying sections of our scripture, we say together the blessing for studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. With what shall I approach the Eternal One?
How shall I worship the God of heaven?
Shall I come before God with burnt offerings?
Or with yearling calves?
Will God be pleased with thousands of rams?
Or with 10,000 rivers of oil?
Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression?
The fruit of my body for the sins of my soul?
People tell you what is good, but what does the Eternal One require of you?
Only to do justly and love mercy and walk humbly with your God.
Eternal God, may the words of Torah taste sweet to us and to all Israel, that we and our children and all the children of your people may come to know you by studying Torah. We praise you, O God, teacher of your people Israel.
We continue together.
Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamehulal b'fi amo, משובח ומפואר בלשון חסידיו ועבדיו, בשבחות ובזמירות, נגדל לך ונמליכך, מלכנו יחיד חי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל בתשבחות.
Sing for joy to the Eternal One, you who are righteous.
For the upright do well to give praise.
Give thanks to the Eternal One with the lyre.
Make music to God with a 10-stringed harp.
Sing to God a new song.
Play well with shouts of joy.
For God's world holds good.
God's every deed is done in faithfulness.
The Eternal One loves righteousness and justice.
The earth is full of God's kindness.
By the Eternal One's word the heavens were made.
And all their host by the breath of God's mouth.
At the divine command the ocean waves rise.
Or gather instead in the vaults of the deep.
Let all the earth revere the Eternal One.
Let all who dwell there stand in awe of God.
Who spoke and it was.
Who commanded and it stood firm. How shall I sing of day and night when it is God who formed them?
How shall I sing of heaven and earth when it is God who founded them?
How shall I sing of mountains and hills when it is God who planted them?
How shall I sing of deserts and seas when it is God who begot them?
How shall I sing of earth and her fullness when it is God who bade them be?
I shall sing of the one who fashioned them all, the one who is above them all, of God, God alone, I shall sing.
Hallelujah, Hallelujah, El B'Kodesho, Hallelujah, B'Kidducho, Hallelujah, B'Gevurato, Hallelujah, Kerov Gudlo,
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, B'Tei Shofar,
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, B'Nevel V'Chino, Hallelujah, B'Tov U'Machol, Hallelujah, B'Minim Ve'Yogav, Batziltzalei Shama.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, Batziltzalei Teruah. Kol HaNeshama Tehallel, Tehallel, Hallelujah.
Please rise. We say together, Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu, Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim u'Ba'aretz. Ki Lecha Na'er Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avotenu, Shir u'Shvacha, Hallel v'Zimra, Brachot v'Hodaot Me'ata ve'ad Olam. Baruch Atah Adonai, Habocher b'Shirei Zimra. And if you're maybe one of Rafi's friends for whom this is a novel experience to come to synagogue, then we hope that you're already enjoying reading and singing the Hebrew, because you've got the letters of the words in phonetics as well. But this is really your opportunity just to start dancing and singing with us, because the first words are no words at all.
Lai, 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 lai,
And instead of our normal prayer for creation, because it was Tu B'Shvat, the birthday of trees this week, we thought we'd share a special prayer with you, the Earth Day prayer.
Today for us is a new day on earth. Let us live it in awe and wonder how everything works. Should the trees cease to grow? Should the sun cease to glow? Should our hearts cease to beat? We thank you again and again that our world is complete. I can think, I can breathe, I can hope, I can sneeze, I can laugh, I can cry, I can pray. For the wonder each day, for the strength come what may, for the power to say, blessed are you, God, who has formed humanity with wisdom and commanded us to be stewards of the earth.
And together we read, Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach.
and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you, and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you.
Would you please rise? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך, בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך. ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך. וקשרתם לעוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך. וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Please be seated.
Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Laman tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai. V'yitem kedoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem. Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai, Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Good and beautiful and true, sound established and enduring are these words now and forever. True it is, eternal one, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
Va'elim Adonai, o mi kamocha, v'ka b'kodesh, nura tehilot, oseh pereh, nura tehilot, oseh tehilot, oseh pereh.
A new song the redeemed sang to your name at the shore of the sea. With one accord they gave thanks and proclaimed your sovereignty.
Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed. Zu Yisrael Israel, Go'aleinu Adonai, Sevaot Shemo, Kadosh Israel, Baruch atah Adonai, Kol Israel, Kol Israel, Israel.
Would you please rise? Eternal God, open up our lips, that our mouths may declare your praise.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Koneh Hakol, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
Sweet mother, I'm coming home.
Sweet mother, I'm coming home.
Now I know I'm not alone.
Now I know I'm not alone.
'Cause I've been far.
I've been far.
Now I'm close.
Now I'm close.
Sweet mother, I'm coming home.
Sweet mother, I'm coming home.
Tell me, mother, can you hear me sing?
Tell me, mother, can you hear me sing?
Your love is everything.
Your love is everything.
Heart and soul.
Heart and soul.
Breath and skin.
Breath and skin.
Your love is everything.
Your love is everything.
Oh, mother, please hold me tight.
Oh, mother, please hold me tight.
Mother, I need some help tonight.
Mother, I need some help tonight.
What went wrong?
What went wrong?
Soon be right.
Will soon be right.
Oh, mother, please hold me tight.
Oh, mother, please hold me tight.
Tell me, mother, can you hear me sing?
Tell me, mother, can you hear me sing?
Your love is everything.
Your love is everything. this world is strange.
Love me, Mother, and make me brave.
Love me, Mother, and make me brave.
In my dream,
In my dream,
or on the stage.
or on this stage.
Oh, Mother, this world is strange.
Oh, Mother, this world is strange.
Tell me, Mother, can you hear me sing?
Tell me, Mother, can you hear me sing?
Your love is everything.
Your love is everything.
Heart and soul.
Heart and soul.
Breath and skin.
Breath and skin.
Your love is everything.
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 Your love is everything. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאיך.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzavaot, Belochol haaretz, Kavodo.
כבודו מלא עולם.
Baruch Kavod Adonai, ממקומו.
ממקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה.
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש. ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש.
Please be seated.
ישמחו במלכותך, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג, המקדשי שביעי, המקדשי שביעי, כולם יספרו ויתענגו מטובך, והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה, למעשה בראשית.
We continue. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments, and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts that we may serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. Rotzei Adonai Eloheinu ba'amacha Yisrael, utfilatam b'ahava t'kabel, utihil ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otecha levadecha, v'yira na'avot. We continue.
מודים אנחנו לך, שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, לעולם ועד.
צור חיינו, מגן אישנו, אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך ונספר תהילתך, על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך, ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלותיך וטובותיך, שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך, ולך נאה להודות.
שים שלום, טובה וברכה, Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom.
Sim Shalom.
Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. Chen v'chesed v'rachamim. V'rachamim. Sim Shalom.
Sim Shalom.
Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amecha. Sim Shalom.
Sim Shalom.
Tova Uvracha. Sim Shalom Tova Uvracha. Tova Uvracha. Tova Uvracha.
Baruch atah Adonai, osei hashalom.
Say shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Say shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Say shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Ye'adam. Oseh shalom b'roma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom b'roma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom b'roma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol bnei Adam. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol bnei Adam.
We now turn to our Torah service, and in a moment we'll go to Rafi and her family to their home so that she will join us. We're extending our sanctuary from this physical sanctuary here all the way to Rafi's home, and as she will be celebrating her bat mitzvah. But we're going to stay in the sanctuary for just a moment longer.
We need to
as
take
we
the scroll out so
introduce-
that we can pass it over to
Exactly.
them,
We
so-
need to sort of do a magical passing over of the scroll as we take a scroll out here and then enter Rafi's home. And do keep the comments coming. It's lovely to see everyone's comments, everyone here cheering Rafi on as we turn to the reading of the Torah.
There is none like you, eternal one, among the gods people worship, and there are no deeds like yours. Your sovereignty is everlasting. Your reign endures from age to age. Would you please rise?
אין כמוך ואלים אדוני, ואין כמעשיך. מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
אחד אלוהינו, גדול אדוננו, קדוש שמו.
Gadlul Adonai
Adonai and Aromamo Shemo Yachtav.
Let us magnify the Eternal One. Together, let us exalt God's name.
לך אדוני הגדולה, והגבורה והתפארת, והנצח וההוד, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני הממלכה, והמתנשא לכל לראש.
And it's a pleasure to be joining Rafi in her sanctuary, Rafi and her family, as she will now turn to the prayer of the Bat Mitzvah. If you're following in the Siddur, it's on page 591.
In the presence of this congregation, which represents the Jewish people all over the world, I give thanks for what I've learned of my Jewish heritage and promise to go on studying it in the years ahead. So may I come to understand ever more deeply and carry out more fully the duties that flow from it. I think of all those who, in past ages, have preserved the Jewish faith and declared their loyalty to it as I do today. I thank my parents and my family, my teachers and my friends, and all who have helped me to reach this day. And I pray to God, guide me and keep me strong so that I may fulfill the high hopes that rest on me. Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
We praise you, eternal God, sovereign of the universe, that you have kept us alive, sustained us, enabled us to reach this season.
My Torah portion is Parashat Korach in Numbers 16 and talks of a rebellion that happened to the Jewish people after they left Egypt. The scroll I am reading from is incredibly special to me, as almost 3 years ago to this day, my brother stood and read from his own Torah portion from this Torah. I'm also incredibly honored, as this Torah was once at the heart of a thriving community in Czechoslovakia, which was decimated by the Nazis during the Holocaust. By using the scroll today, I honor their memory. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chavanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור. הביט וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור. דבר אל העדה לאמור. העלו מסביב למשכן קורח, דתן ואברהם. ויקום משה ויעלה אל דתן ואברהם וילכו אחרים זקני ישראל. וידבר אל העדה לאמור. סורו נא מעל אחרי האנשים הרשעים העדה ואל תיגעו בכל אשר לכם פן תיזפו. בכל חטאותם וילכו מתוך קורח דתן ואברהם. מסביב לדתן ואברהם יצא ניצבים פתע אחריהם ובשכם ובפניהם ותופן. ויאמר משה בזאת תדעו כי אדוני שלחני לאסוף את כל 50 כאלה כי לא מלבי. אם כמות כל האדם ימיתו עליך ופצע כל האדם יפקד עליכם לא אדוני שלחני. ואם בריאה יברא אדוני ופצע את אדוני פתע בכל אותם ואת כל אשר לכם וירדו שאולה וידעתם כי נעשה חנצים כאלה את אדוני. ויהי כל כלתו לדבר אחרי חדבר כאלה ותפתח הארץ אשר תחתיכם. ותפתח הארץ את פיה ותבלע אותם ואת בתותם ואת כל האדם אשר לקורח ואת כל הרכוש. וידעתם כי בכל אשר לכם חיים שאולה ותוכס אחריכם הארץ וישראל מתוך הכחל וכל ישראל אשר סביבותיכם נעשו לכולם כי אמרו פן תבלענו הארץ ואיש יצא מאת אדוני ותאכל את 50 ו200 איש מקריבי התורה. And the Eternal One spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, Stand back from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant. But they fell on their face and said, O God, source of the breath of all flesh, when one man sins, will you be wrathful with the whole community? The Eternal One spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the community and say, Withdraw from about the abodes of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses rose and went to Dathan and Abiram, the elders of Israel, following him. He addressed the community, saying, Move away from the tents of these wicked men and touch nothing that belongs to them, lest you be wiped out for all their sins. Now, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram had come out, and they stood at the entrance of their tents with their wives, their children, and their little ones. And Moses said, By this you shall know that it was the Eternal One who sent me to do all these things, that they are not of my own devising. If these men die as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, then it was not the Eternal One who sent me. But if the Eternal One brings about something unheard of, so that the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive to the Sheol, you shall know that these men have spurned the Eternal One. Scarcely had he finished speaking all these words, when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with all their households, all Korah's people, and all their possessions. They went down alive into the Sheol with all that belonged to them. The earth closed over them, and they vanished from the midst of the congregation. All Israel around them fled at their shrieks, for they said, The earth might swallow us. And the fire went forth from the Eternal One, and consumed 250 men offering the incense. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam naten v'tafenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Baruch Shenotan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato.
Mazel tov already to Rafi, but there is a second part, so we're going to go back to Rafi now, who will give her Dvar Torah first before she turns to the Haftarah.
Nice posture.
My Torah portion is Parashat Korach, set during the 40 years where the Jewish people wandered the desert. Although, to be fair, they spent 2 years wandering the desert and 38 years complaining. Moses and his brother Aaron had been assigned by God to look after the Jewish people and help guide them. Korah, Dathan, and Abiram weren't pleased with this and refused to listen to Moses and Aaron, and, gathering a group of 250 supporters, complained about Moses freeing them from slavery, as at least they'd had food and water that was easily accessible in Egypt. We know how the rest of the story ends, with Korah, Dathan, Abiram, and their wives and children being swallowed up by the earth. Their 250 supporters ended up being burned alive by God, and many more die after that. Reading this for the first time, I remember thinking quite clearly, why did the wives and children of these 3 men get affected too? They didn't do anything wrong. I've searched up questions about Korah, Dathan, and Abiram's wives. What were their names? How many children did they have? What sort of position did they hold in the community? And have come up with nothing. Just more information about the story of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Just a story about their husbands, who ultimately ruined their lives. As I am a fan of musical theatre, I feel like it would be relevant to mention the musical Six, which retells the story of Henry VIII's wives from their points of views, and how they imagine how different their life had been had they not been living in the 15th and 16th century, where it was frowned upon for women to have opinions. We're shown a wildly different side to these women from what history has told us, because the point is very much in the word. It's his story. Well, for the main focus of my Dvar Torah, I want to ask, what if it were her story? The stories we're told are largely from a male perspective. In the Tanakh, there are a few women who are mentioned, like Deborah, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, Miriam, Abigail, Rahab, and Esther. While all these women play an important part in their own stories, and are viewed as very important, the amount of named women whose stories are told as their own don't even make up 80% of the Tanakh, even though roughly 50% of the world's population are female. Another story that I feel is relevant to mention is the story of Job. Satan challenges God, telling him that people only praise his name when they are having a good life. God accepts his challenge and begins to take away all of Job's possessions. He suddenly has no livestock or crops. His 7 children all die, as do all his servants. Even after this, Job stays faithful and loyal to God. Then he contracts a terrible illness with sores all over his body. Job's wife, Satidos, tells him to stop believing in God, but Job refuses and eventually gains a visit from God, who asks him impossible questions, which shows Job just how little he knows about God's plan. Job never learns why he suffered, but soon after this visit, his health is restored, all his servants return, and he gets twice as much property as before. Satidos falls pregnant again, and Job lives a very long life. A happy ending. My dad showed me this story to build on the women of most Bible and Torah stories. No one's ever stopped to think how Satidos felt, losing all her children and almost losing her husband. No one thought to ask if she was doing okay after she lost her sources for food. If Job gets a visit from God, then who tells Satidos' story? Never mind that going through childbirth leaves its own lasting impact, and losing all your children will leave a mother close to death. Satidos is just like the wives of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, and her story goes untold, just like theirs. Another pair of women who I feel like it would be important to mention is Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton and Maria Reynolds. How many of us pay attention to them? This is in no way a criticism of how Lin-Manuel Miranda has written the play Hamilton, I Wouldn't Be So Bold. This is just me changing how the story is told and looking at it from a female perspective. What we know from the musical is that Maria Reynolds is seducing Hamilton on purpose. Her voice is low and flirtatious. She targets Hamilton when he's alone and when his wife and children are away. She's wearing red lipstick and a red dress, the colour of passion and sin. Quite frankly, Mariah is painted as a villain, but that's only because the history is from Hamilton's point of view. From Mariah's, things look very different. She was physically and mentally abused by her husband, James Reynolds. She had a daughter, was only 23 years old, and was largely uneducated due to the lack of her family's wealth. It was very likely that Mariah was manipulated into the scheme and was told by her husband to keep manipulating Hamilton. After Hamilton receives James Reynolds' blackmail note, saying that unless he is paid generously, he will tell Eliza about their affair, he goes to Mariah, screaming at her, acting as if he were the victim in the scheme, as if he were the one manipulated, even though he was in full control of his actions. No one tells Mariah's story as the victim, as the abused woman who just wanted a better life for her daughter, who was looking for help. She was described as deliberately seducing Hamilton, and both Hamilton and Reynolds refer to her with a few choice words that I can't repeat in synagogue. If Hamilton gets a musical detailing his story, who will tell Mariah's? Who will paint her in the light that she deserves? Hamilton's story is told by Eliza, his wife. Without giving you the whole plot of Hamilton, which believe me, I could do, playing all the parts with full choreography, it's enough to say that Eliza stands by her husband, despite his obsession with work, his affair, and his tendency to rush into events hot-headed, something that eventually got him killed in a duel at 47. Following his death, Eliza begins telling her husband's story in the finale, Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story. She interviews all the soldiers who fought with Hamilton, raises funds for the George Washington Monument, speaks out against slavery, and builds the first private orphanage in New York City, even living on until she's 97. Eliza still managed to forgive Hamilton after everything he'd done to her, and went on to tell his story. But the worldwide phenomenon isn't called Eliza, it's Hamilton, and she's still only viewed as an attachment to him. To conclude, I want you to try and think about the people whose stories don't get told. Eliza Hamilton, Mariah Reynolds, Sukidos, who lost all her children, the wives of Henry VIII, the wives of Cora, Dathan, and Abiram, and all the many, many female stories that we simply know nothing about. Who tells their story? Just theirs, not as an attachment to anyone else, just them. Who is the one who helps keep their memory alive? Let's let the ladies from 6 have the last word. History is about to get overthrown. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher bachar b'nbiim tovim, baratza b'divrachem, hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habacher b'Torah, u'v'Moshe avdo, u'v'Yisrael amo, u'v'Nbiei ha'emet v'tzedek. My Haftarah is from the book of Judges 5. And states that anyone who is in God's side will always triumph. I find it fitting that my Haftarah tells us about Deborah, one of the few prophetesses, which ties in nicely to my Dvar Torah. On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang, When locks go untrimmed in Israel, when people dedicate themselves, bless the Eternal One. Hear, O kings, give ear, O potentates, I will sing to the Eternal One, will hymn the Eternal One, the God of Israel. O Eternal One, when you came forth from Seir, advanced from the country of Edom, the earth trembled. The heavens dripped, the clouds dripped water. The mountains quaked before the God of Sinai, before the Eternal One, God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, caravans ceased, and wayfarers went by roundabout paths. Deliverance ceased in Israel, to you arose. O Deborah arose, O mother in Israel. When they choose new gods, was there a fighter than in the gates? No shield or spear was seen among the 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with Israel's leaders, with the dedicated people, bless the Eternal One. You riders on tawny she-asses, you who sit on saddled rugs, and you wayfarers, declare it. Louder than the sound of archers, there among the watering places, let them chant the gracious acts of the Eternal One, God's gracious deliverance in Israel. Then did the people of God march down to the gates. Awake, awake, O Deborah. Awake, awake, strike up the chant. Arise, O Barak, take your captives, O son of Abinoam. Then was the remnant made victor over the mighty. The Eternal One's people won victory over the warriors. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, so kol ha'alamim, tzedek b'chol hadorot, che'el chane'eman, hayomer vayosher, hamdber u'makayim, shechol davarim, emet v'tzedek.
Amen. Amen. Mazel tov. Shkoyach. 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 And we are now going to turn to a few more family members as we turn to the loyal blessings.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members, and all who enter this synagogue to meet, to study and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts amongst us and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the House of Israel throughout the world. Let those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will.
Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbours, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem.
Yehallelu et Shem Adonai, ki nisgav shemo levado.
Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, v'yarim keret le'amo, tehillah l'chol hasidav, livnei Yisrael, Am Karovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah.
And as you read the Torah so beautifully and shared such important words in your Dvar Torah with us, I hope you'll get a chance to look at all the wonderful comments afterwards that are praising you for your wonderful Dvar Torah, Rafi. It's wonderful to see you there surrounded by your family, in the presence of the Torah, in the presence of the special Torah held by your brother, who also got to read from that Torah as well. And so we ask for God's blessing for you. מי שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, ואמותינו שרה, רבקה, רחל ולאה, הוא יברך את בת המצווה, רפאלה בת אהרון וחווה, שעלתה לתורה. You came up to the Torah today. You reached the age of Bat Mitzvah. And in our Amidah, it says, Lador vador nagid godlecha, from generation to generation, we shall make your name great, eternal one, our God. And your Bat Mitzvah today truly is a moment of from generation to generation. Your grandfather, who we just saw reading the prayer for the state of Israel, taught you your Torah portion, and what a fantastic job he did also. I think we can praise you, but we also must praise your grandfather. And so it's really beautiful to see that Torah scroll metaphorically pass through the generations. And we pray that you may continue to study this heritage, as we have no doubt you will, and continue to take its teachings to heart and pass it indeed on to future generations, that chain of Lador vador will continue, so that you may be like you are today, a source of pride to your family and friends, and a worthy member of our community. And so we bless you with these ancient words. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and keep you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'choneka. May God look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God reach out to you in tenderness and give you peace. For behold, a good doctrine has been given you. It is a tree of life to those who hold fast to it, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace.
Ki lekach tov natati lachem, Torati ta'azovu, et chaim hi lemachazikim ba, v'tomcher hameushar, darechecha darchei noam, v'chol nativotecha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Kaddish yameinu kekedem. Kaddish yameinu kekedem.
And Rafi, we just smile at you once more. Give us one more big smile, and then you may be seated with your family and relax as your big moment. Yeah, wonderful. We get Rob in the corner as well. The circle is a little bit small. I apologize. But really, we smile with you, and it's wonderful to see you all there. Well done. And you can now sit down and just relax.
Thank you.
You are on mute. How familiar we have become with that little sentence. The phrase so shaped what we think of 2020 that it even featured in the drone display over London during the New Year's fireworks. And we are equally familiar with, and maybe a little tired of, the matching phrase, unmute yourself. Anat Hoffman, the director of the Israel Religious Action Center and one of the central figures in the struggle for women's rights in Israel, as part of her involvement with Women of the Wall, reflected this week on the age of Zoom. She said, "Almost every day, I hear the host asking a woman to unmute herself. It never fails to move me. When we witness a woman unmute herself, it is a sacred moment." In her Dvar Torah, Rafi spoke powerfully about the importance of giving women the opportunity to tell their stories, to find their voices. Rafi, in her portion, read the story of the rebellion of Korach. The story is normally cited as an example of a dispute not for the sake of heaven. Instead, Rafi decided to raise a dispute for the sake of heaven, raising the issue of continued inequality in our society, not for selfish reasons, but because it is an issue that needs to be addressed to create a fairer society, a fairer view of history. Very fittingly, the Torah portion that we would normally have read this morning describes an important crossroad in this regard. While we meet Miriam right at the start of the story of Moses being placed in a basket in the river Nile, it is only in this week's Torah portion, Parashat Beshalach, in Exodus chapter 15 chapters later than she first appears, that we learn her name. After the Israelites' crossing of the Sea of Reeds, they break out in song, and we read in verse 20. Then Miriam, the prophet, Aaron's sister, picked up a hand drum, and all the women went out after her and danced with hand drums, and Miriam chanted for them. It is at this moment that Miriam truly becomes a character in her own right. She is no longer merely the sister. She is a prophet. Female prophets are far and few between in the Hebrew Bible, and so it is not surprising that the rabbis selected the song of another female prophet, the prophet Deborah, as the Haftarah to match the portion. But by doing so, the rabbis also made a clear statement about what they felt was the hallmark of this Torah portion. Instead of focusing, for example, on the manna that first appears in this portion from heaven, the rabbis draw attention to women finding their voice. The rabbis' choice is really rather extraordinary, especially because, as Rafi quite rightly highlighted, women are continuously marginalized within the biblical narrative. As the American feminist scholar Dr. Judith Plasko highlights in her important book, Standing Again at Sinai, at the central moment of Jewish history, at the revelation, fear and expectation, what they heard when the men heard these words of Moses, we do not know. It was not their experience that instead the chronicler or that interested the chronicler, or that informed or shaped the Torah. Not only were women marginalized in our textual tradition, they were often and sometimes continue to be silenced. The American legal scholar Professor Catherine McKinnon analyzes in her essay Only Words the impact of that silencing. Social inequality is substantially created and enforced, that is done through words and images. Social hierarchy cannot and does not exist without being embodied in meanings and expressed in communications. As liberal Jews committed to egalitarianism, we must therefore rise to the challenge of progressing beyond giving girls the opportunity to become bat mitzvah or allowing women to be rabbis. While this generation of young Jewish women like Rafi no longer have to be asked to unmute themselves, there is still a long way to go until we have unmuted the many generations of Jewish women that came before us. In Beyond Egalitarianism, Plasko suggests a number of steps that we should take along the way. She says that we must begin by hearing the silence. Miriam is called a prophet, but the words of her prophecy are shrouded in the silence of the biblical text. Having heard the silence, we must then make space to name the silence, as Rafi did in her Dvar Torah. For Plasko, this is not just about allowing women to speak, but also about challenging historical and structural impediments to women's speech. The third stage, then, is creating the structures that allow women to speak. Like the moderator of a discussion who sees only men raising their hands to ask a question and pauses and says, "I'd like to take the next question from a woman." Or the rabbi who chooses to quote a female commentator rather than turning to the same men that our tradition has turned to for centuries. And finally, women must, like Rafi, take the authority to fill the silence. As Plasko puts it, once silence is named and space created, there's nothing to do but to take courage and to speak. During the past few decades, this is exactly what has happened in the Jewish world. We have seen huge creativity and deep scholarship from women and individuals from other marginalized groups, be it due to their sexuality, gender identity, or race. But there is still an important task for us to elevate these voices. And so on this day, when a young Jewish woman has found her voice in synagogue, I went to lift up the words of a woman written before Rafi was even born. It is a commentary on Miriam standing at the sea by Rabbi Ruth Zorn, written in 1981. I, Miriam, stand at the sea and turn to face the desert, stretching endless and still. My eyes are dazzled, the sky brilliant blue, sunburned sands unyielding white. My hands turn to dove wings, my arms reach for the sky, and I want to sing the song rising inside me. My mouth open, I stop. Where are the words? Where the melody? In a moment of panic, my eyes go blind. Can I take a step without knowing a destination? Will I falter? Will I fail? Will the ground sing away from under me? The song still unformed. How can I sing? To take the first step, to sing a new song, is to close one's eyes and dive into unknown waters. For a moment knowing nothing, risking all, but then to discover. The waters are friendly, the ground is firm, and the song rises again. Out of my mouth come words lifting the wind, and I hear for the first the song that has been in my heart, silent, unknown, even to me.
We now move to our concluding prayers, and would you please rise? Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen v'amen.
Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael, oseh niflaot levado. וברוך שם כבודו לעולם, וימלא כבודו את כל הארץ. אמן ואמן.
והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. יהי חסדך אדוני עלינו, כאשר ייחלנו לך. כל גויים אשר עשית, יבואו וישתחוו לפניך, אדוני, וכבדו לשמך. ברוך אדוני ביום.
ברוך אדוני בלילה.
ברוך אדוני בשוכבנו.
ברוך אדוני בקומנו. Avinu, Shabbat our God in heaven, let your unity be acknowledged and your sovereignty established forever. Reign over us now and always.
Adonai Melech Adonai Malach Adonai Yimloch Leolam Va'ed.
As we approach Kaddish, please feel free, if you are joining us this morning and are remembering a yahrzeit or someone who died recently, to please share their name in the chat with us. Creator of the universe, you give us life in which joys and sorrows are commingled in accordance with your wisdom, and you send death with its promise of eternal peace. Teach us to accept humbly and courageously whatever burden is laid upon us. On this Shabbat, we recall the names of those remembered people in our community Bertha Mendoza, the mother of Lynn Sharp. Evelyn Elton, the mother of Gary, grandmother of Sarah and James, and mother-in-law of Ali. Henry Lawrence Drapkin, the father of Neil. Lily Conn, the mother of Elkin. Rosalind Cashman, the sister of Sharon Phillips and Jackie Narden, aunt of Mark and Ellie, Michael and Ross. And Siggy Gordon, the father of Michael. And we regret the deaths this week in our community of Leslie Morpurgo, the wife of Frank and sister of our member Alan Masters and sister-in-law of Michelle. Of Ahmed Moafi, the cousin of Ahmed Musa. Of Erna Meissner, the survivor from Kolin, the town where the scroll where Rafi read from today came from, who enthusiastically supported our Czech projects and who died this week. And Georges Arfi, the friend of Michelle and Celia Naval.
We also think of Serena Rothschild, Beth Rothschild, as remembering her on this yahrzeit.
Eternal God, comfort those who mourn, and let the light of faith illumine the darkness of their sorrow with the hope of immortality. Strengthen us at all times with an unfailing trust in your providence. As we read together. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chai echon v'yom echon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'a v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitada v'yitalei v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu, Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechemata, damiran balma v'imru, amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru, amen. May great peace descend from heaven and abundant life be granted to us, to all Israel, to all humanity, and to all those who mourn. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated.
And we are going to, after Adon Olam, which is a special Adon Olam today from friends of the family, especially for Rafi, as our closing song. After Adon Olam, we invite you all to join us in the Kaddish Zoom room so that you can all wish Rafi Mazel Tov. I know you've already done it so much. It's really fantastic to see the many, many comments, and it truly creates a sense of community that we are able to celebrate with each other, that we're able to extend comfort to all those who mourn, those who are remembering yahrzeits, or mourn recent deaths as well. But do come and join us for Kiddush in our Zoom room. The meeting ID, if you don't have it, appears on the closing screen. And otherwise, if you don't want to come into the Zoom room itself, we'll come back live onto our stream anyway. But for now, we're going to conclude with a special rendition of Adon Olam.
Oseh shalom bimrumav hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimrumav hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imru amen. Al kol Yisrael ve'imru Adon Olam, Hashem Alach, B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra, Led Nasa, V'chefso kol, Azai Melech Shamo Nikra, V'yaharei, Kiglot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nora, V'hu Haya, V'hu Oveh, V'hu yeh b'tzifara, Adon Olam Hashem Alach, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-yara, da-da-da-da-da-yara, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. manos li, menat cosi beom ekrad on olam, asher malach, beterem kol yitzir nivra, led nasa, v'chesokot, ad zayin melech yaman ikra.